Imagine a world where the mountains are so old they remember the first light of the sun and where a single gold ring carries the weight of an entire civilization. For many, the fantasy genre begins and ends with the work of J.R.R. Tolkien. But it was the cinematic vision of Peter Jackson that brought Middle-earth to life for the modern age. This is the story of The Lord of the Rings. A production so massive it required the labor of thousands, the invention of entirely new technologies, and a level of faith in storytelling that the film industry had never seen before. The journey began in 1997 when a director from New Zealand, known mostly for cult horror films, convinced a studio to let him film 3 massive movies all at once. This was a monumental gamble. If the first film failed, the entire project would be a disaster. But Jackson and his team at Weta Workshop were driven by a singular goal: to make Middle-earth feel not like a fairy tale, but like actual history. They didn't want plastic props. They wanted hand-forged swords, real chainmail, and sets that felt like they had been standing for 1,000 years. The heart of the story rests on the smallest of shoulders. When we meet Frodo Baggins in the rolling green hills of the Shire, we see a world of peace and comfort. But the arrival of the wizard Gandalf changes everything. The discovery of the One Ring, forged by the Dark Lord Sauron in the fires of Mount Doom, sets a fellowship of 9 companions on a journey across a continent. It is a story about the corruption of power. But more importantly, it is a story about how the smallest person can change the course of the future. The production was a masterclass in big-scale filmmaking. To create the hobbits, the crew used forced perspective, building 2 versions of every set, one large and one small, so that the actors would look the correct size without the use of digital shrinking. When they needed an army of 10,000 Uruk high for the Battle of Helm's Deep, they didn't just use computers. They filmed thousands of extras in the pouring rain for months on end. The result was a visceral, muddy, and terrifying reality that made the audience feel every clash of steel. One of the greatest achievements of the trilogy was the creation of Gollum, played by Andy Serkis through motion capture technology. Gollum was the first digital character to deliver a truly human, soul-searching performance. He wasn't just a monster. He was a tragic figure, a victim of the ring's addiction. This technology changed the way movies were made forever, paving the way for everything from Avatar to the modern superhero epics. The music of Howard Shore provided the heartbeat of the films with over 80 distinct themes. The score acted like a guide, telling the audience exactly where they were and what was at stake. From the playful flutes of the Shire to the booming brass of the mines of Moria, the music elevated the film into a modern opera. It is a score that feels ancient and timeless, capturing the sorrow of a fading world and the hope of a new age. But beyond the spectacle, The Lord of the Rings resonated because of its themes of friendship and sacrifice. The bond between Frodo and Samwise Gamgee is the emotional core of the entire trilogy. In the darkest moments on the slopes of the volcano, when hope seems completely lost, it isn't magic that saves the day. It is loyalty. It is the idea that even in the face of absolute evil, there are things worth fighting for. When The Return of the King swept the Academy Awards in 2004, winning all 11 categories it was nominated for, it was a victory for the entire fantasy genre. It was the first time a fantasy film had ever won Best Picture, proving that stories of elves, dwarves, and rings could hold the same weight as the most serious historical dramas. Today, New Zealand is forever linked to Middle-earth, the rolling hills of Matamata and the volcanic peaks of Tongariro remain as monuments to a production that spent 438 days in principal photography. The films remain a benchmark for quality, a reminder of what happens when a group of artists is given the time and the resources to pursue a vision to its absolute limit. The legacy of Tolkien's world continues to grow, but the original trilogy stands as a perfect circle. It is a story that begins in a hole in the ground and ends with the departure of the last ship from the Grey Havens. It is a journey we take alongside the characters, feeling every mile of the road. The next time you see the towering statues of the Argonath or hear the roar of a Balrog in the dark, don't just see a movie. See a dream that was made real through the sweat and blood of a team that refused to take the easy path. As the fellowship breaks and the king returns to his throne, do you see a myth from a distant land? Or do you see a reflection of our own world, where even the smallest act of courage can turn the tide of darkness? Thanks for watching.